My parents increased my rent to support my brother, the golden child, so I left. Now they're freaking out because they can't afford to live without my rent money. I've always lived at my parents' house, but it's not because I'm a failure with no future. I'm 25 years old, I work as a web developer, and I've been paying all my bills since I was 18. I've been paying $50 rent a month to live in my childhood bedroom. While my friends were enjoying the university experience, I was already contributing financially to the family home. For me, it was more reasonable to help my parents than to give money to an unknown landlord, especially since my job is only 15 minutes from home. The problem isn't my situation but my older brother Drew's. He's 28 and the living example of the favorite child. My parents have always treated Drew as if he were a divine gift. From childhood, the differences were noticeable. If Drew broke something or made a mistake, his errors were justified as part of his journey to find his way. While if I made any mistake, I received endless sermons about responsibility and respect for belongings. Drew dropped out of university twice, jumped between at least 8 different jobs, got fired from most of them, and dedicated himself to setting up businesses that actually seemed more like scams through Facebook. However, in each relapse, my parents defended him, insisting that he was finding his way, and that he was very entrepreneurial with big dreams. In contrast, I maintained a stable job, paying rent and helping around the house, which sometimes made me feel totally invisible. About a month ago, Drew called my parents crying, announcing that he and his wife were between houses, which I understood as being without money and without a place to live. Soon they appeared at the door with his wife, Ami, their 2 children, 7-year-old Zoe and 4-year-old Tyler, and an energetic Pomeranian puppy named Zeus. It turned out that his latest business venture in the world of cryptocurrencies had failed, and as expected, they were evicted from their apartment. My parents didn't hesitate for a second. "You can stay, count on us." Without even consulting my opinion, from one moment to the next, the home that was once relatively quiet became total chaos. Things got complicated. The children ran and screamed from 6 in the morning until almost 9 at night. The dog, who was barely trained, soiled my belongings, even my backpack and my bed. On one occasion, my workspace, which used to be a separate room where I could work from home 3 days a week, is now crammed with things that didn't fit in the guest room, leaving me without a suitable place to code. Furthermore, the house has become a dump. The common room is full of toys, food scraps, and dog hair. And to top it all off, my things are broken or mysteriously disappear. When I try to talk about it, the answer is always that the children were just playing or that accidents happen. The strangest thing is Drew's change in attitude. He has become excessively protective every time I talk to Ami. Just yesterday, when I asked if she was finished using the toaster, Drew appeared out of the blue as if he were defending someone from an unwanted advance, as if insinuating that I was flirting with her. Understandably, I'm already fed up with so much hypocrisy. And to top it off, I'm still paying my $50 monthly rent. Drew and his family's contribution is zero. At first, I kept quiet, thinking that since we were family and going through difficult times, I should tolerate it. However, a week ago, my mother confronted me in my room with that look that foreshadows an uncomfortable request. Nervously, I said, "What do you need, Mom?" And she, fiddling with her wedding ring, mentioned that now that Drew and his family had moved in, the household expenses, food, utilities, etc., had increased considerably. They asked me to pay an extra $300 a month to make up the difference. I replied with all the clarity in the world, "You want me to pay more rent when Drew and his family live here without contributing anything?" Her response was that it wasn't free, that we are family and in difficult times we help each other. That phrase was repeated over and over, and I felt exploited. The situation doesn't end there. On Sunday during dinner, my father joined my mother to say that in difficult times, everyone must do their part. Drew, between bites of food, vaguely thanked me, as if everything were fine. To top it all off, that same day my mother casually commented that Drew and Ami had planned to go out Friday night for a date night, and I, without being consulted, should stay home to take care of the children. When I protested, saying that even though I didn't have plans it seemed unfair, my mother dismissed it. And to make matters worse, Drew intervened, saying, "Come on, man, it's been a while since we went out." Everyone looked at me, waiting for me to give in, and in the end I agreed. Friday, instead of enjoying the new game I had eagerly awaited, I spent the night chasing 2 hyperactive children and a naughty dog all over the house. Drew and Ami promised to return at 10, but it wasn't until midnight that they returned, visibly drunk and without a word of apology. And as if that weren't enough, while I was trying to rest, Zeus left a rather unpleasant surprise in my room just as I was about to go to sleep. The situation is pushing me to the limit, and I wonder if I'm being irrational for feeling so overwhelmed, or if all this is really unacceptable. I've always avoided conflict, but now I feel like I'm always the one who has to give in, while Drew gets away with any responsibility. Update 1. I thank everyone for their comments on my previous post. I honestly didn't expect so many to identify with my family problems. However, I must report that the situation has worsened. After the night of chaos I just described, I was still debating what to do. Although the situation at home was unsustainable, the idea of moving scared me. Apartments in this area are extremely expensive, and I'm saving for my dream of having my own video game studio. I also felt that giving up meant admitting a kind of defeat to my parents. But things got even more complicated. The morning after that chaotic night, I woke up to find Ami rummaging through my drawers without any shame, blatantly going through my personal belongings. That image left me shocked. I honestly don't know how far this situation can go. I stayed still for a second before asking, "What are you doing?" She startled as if I had caught her stealing, and in a way technically I had. "I was looking for tape for the kids to do a craft," she claimed. I mentioned there was tape in the kitchen drawer, where it had been for about 20 years. When I commented that she hadn't found it there, she responded defensively before I could say anything else. At that precise moment, Drew appeared in the doorway, almost as if he had a radar to detect when someone questioned his wife's nonsense. In a somewhat aggressive tone, he asked, "Everything okay around here?" His way of speaking implied that I was threatening Ami to the point of accusing her of rummaging through my things. "Your wife is going through my belongings," I said. And that's when Drew's face hardened. She insisted she was just looking for tape, and he, protecting her with his arm around Ami, retorted, "Would you like me to start rummaging through your things?" He justified himself by saying that as a tenant, I am a guest in the house, something I paid to live in. The conversation quickly turned into an argument about money and responsibilities. Drew scoffed at mentioning the number of real problems some of us have, contrasting it with the money that, in his opinion, always seemed to be the center of my complaints. I was about to lose my patience. Although I have a rule of not hitting people I consider less intelligent than me, Drew seemed to be testing those limits. I decided to withdraw before letting go of something that would make family gatherings even more uncomfortable. Later that night, while I was heading to the kitchen for a snack, I heard Drew talking to my parents in the hallway. They hadn't seen me, so I stopped to listen. Drew was criticizing Jake, saying that the boy had always been too selfish and that for the first time he hoped he would really help the family. He mentioned that unlike me, who has been paying rent for 7 years, Jake had never contributed financially. I was about to intervene to support my own complaints, but my mother intervened. "I know, honey, he just doesn't understand what you mean to the family, especially with the kids, but at least he agreed to pay extra rent." At that moment I realized that I had never agreed to that increase. I had only thought about considering it. The situation became even more complicated when my mother dropped another bomb. "Oh, and also Drew and Ami need someone to watch the kids this weekend since they have a wedding to attend," I asked, astonished. "Just from Saturday afternoon to Sunday night?" She answered as if nothing, downplaying it, while Drew added, "Don't be so selfish, it's not like you have any serious plans." The truth is, I did have plans. Although I preferred to lie and say that I would help my friend Chris with his move, when in reality I had commitments that I had set myself. The accumulation of irritations reached its peak a few days later when, arriving home after work, I discovered that Zeus had destroyed my expensive gaming headset, equipment that cost around $300. When I confronted Drew, he shrugged and said, "It's just a headset. He's a puppy, what did you expect?" I replied that I expected him to keep his dog under control and replace what he had broken, as we didn't have money to be renewing expensive equipment. Drew dismissively advised me that if I cared so much I should buy another one, or better yet, stop wasting time on video games, alluding to his own failed cryptocurrency investments. However, the final blow was when, without my knowledge, I heard Drew and my mother discussing my savings account. They were planning together that I would contribute part of my savings to help the family in these difficult times, allowing Drew to continue living without consequences for his lifestyle. That was the last straw. After years of working overtime, skipping vacations, and living frugally to save, I realized they saw me only as a money-making machine with legs. That same night I went back to my room, turned on my laptop, and started looking at apartment ads. I didn't know how I was going to afford the move or where I would go, but one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living there, not even another month. Not with those people who only used me financially. That night, insomnia was my only companion as my mind went through all the options. Should I confront them once again? Try to reason? Or just give in and pay the extra rent to keep the peace? No alternative seemed appealing. Around 3 a.m., I sent a message to my old friend Chris, that friend from high school with whom, although we had drifted apart after graduation, we still occasionally met for a few beers. I asked him if he knew anyone who needed a roommate. I didn't expect a reply until the next morning. But surprisingly, Chris replied immediately. He told me that his roommate had told him he was moving in with his girlfriend next month and asked if I was interested. The idea sounded perfect, a chance to escape family hell. Although the rent at the new place was $775 plus utilities, somewhat higher than what I was paying at home, it was less than the $750 my parents intended to charge after the adjustment. And most importantly, I wouldn't have to put up with endless arguments anymore. Without hesitation, I accepted the proposal. We made a quick deal and established that over the weekend they would finalize all the details. So I found myself with 3 weeks to organize the move without unleashing an all-out war at home. Although I wasn't sure how I would explain my decision to my parents, I was convinced that it was time to leave that stifling environment behind. As soon as I decided to leave, I knew they were going to use all their manipulation tactics. Guilt, anger, feigning concern, and of course trying to squeeze every last penny out of me before I left. So, I went into stealth mode and Operation GTFO went into action. The first thing was to put all the loose ends in order. I called my bank, changed passwords and security questions, and even canceled the receipt of bank statements at home, in case they were even thinking of trying to take my savings. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. Then came the physical escape plan. I couldn't just pack everything up without them noticing. So I had to be cunning. I started by packing things no one would miss. The books on my shelf, the winter clothes I kept at the bottom of the closet, and extra computer equipment. Every day before going to work, I carried a small load to my car, and either during lunch or after work, I dropped it off at Chris's house. His roommate had no problem letting me store some boxes in the living room until he moved out. Thank God for knowing decent people. The most complicated part was keeping calm in front of my family, pretending normalcy when deep down I wanted to let out everything I thought about someone's boyfriend. Drew continued with his lordly attitude, walking around the house as if he owned the place, allowing his children and even his demonic dog, Zeus, to wreak havoc. Speaking of Zeus, he almost ruined my cover. Every time I moved something from my room, he would start barking and following me. I had no choice but to always carry dog treats in my pocket and calm him down instantly, feeling like I was starring in a heist movie. I had a couple of near misses, like when Zoe, Drew's 7-year-old daughter, saw me loading a box into the car with an innocence that almost gave me a heart attack. "What are you carrying in the box, Uncle Jake?" she asked. Without hesitation, I replied that they were old things that I would donate, papers and books of no interest. Although she offered to help, I told her no, that I had to go to work. She was disappointed, but she soon went off to play. Sometimes the short attention span of children turns out to be a blessing. Meanwhile, my parents kept pressing with comments about bills and expenses every time I was around, and my father gave me the silent treatment if I didn't immediately hand over that extra $300. The worst, however, was Drew, who one night while I was trying to watch TV, started to give me a lesson on financial responsibility. "Jake, when you have your own family, you'll understand that sometimes you have to make sacrifices." The irony was tremendous, coming from a 28-year-old man who still lived at his parents' house. I replied that it was a low blow, that I was going through difficult times, that the crypto market was volatile, a scam, and that he had fallen into the trap twice. Drew got defensive and walked away angrily. It wasn't long before another family meeting was called. One night, Mom called everyone to the living room. My father, Drew, Ami, and me. The children were already in bed. According to her, since the children were growing, they needed more space. The proposal was that they occupy my room, and I moved to the utility room in the basement, A windowless room with a futon that already looked older than me, and right next to the washing machine that ran all the time. Absolutely not, I exclaimed, unable to contain myself. Mom tried to justify herself by saying that it would be temporary until Drew and Ami got back on their feet. I asked incredulously, and when will that be? They've been here for a month, and there's not a shred of progress in moving out. I'm applying for jobs, Drew protested, accusing me of spending time playing Xbox and complaining about how difficult my life was. My mother interrupted, trying to mediate. Finally, firmly, I made it clear. I pay rent for my room, and I'm not moving to the basement so that Drew's children can have my space. The room fell silent. My father looked uncomfortable. Mom seemed about to resort to her usual manipulations. Drew gave me a withering look as if he thought I had hurt his dog, which, to top it all off, was about to happen. Ami broke the silence, saying that it was incredibly selfish that the children were crammed into a tiny room while I had so much space. I almost burst out laughing and replied, "You know what's really selfish? Moving in with the whole family into someone else's house, and then pretending to be entitled to more space." She reacted as if she had just been slapped. Drew angrily interjected, "Don't you talk to my wife like that?" "Oh, and I, already tired of so much hypocrisy, replied that being 3 inches taller and going to the gym regularly, unlike him, I didn't have to put up with his nonsense anymore. Drew quickly shrunk and retreated to Ami's side, muttering something about how difficult it was for the children to bear my presence. Looking at everyone's angry and disappointed faces, I understood something vital. These people will never change. They will continue to take advantage until there is nothing left of me. That same night, I decided it was time to act definitively. I announced that I was going to sleep, making it clear that I had no intention of moving to the basement or giving up my room. As I left, I heard Ami whisper to Drew, "I told you he's always been the problem." Later, I confirmed my plans by sending a message to Chris to see if I could move in earlier. I would sleep on his couch until his roommate left. He agreed without hesitation, and so Operation GTFO entered its final phase. There would be no more good guy. It was time to put myself first. Now, with everything ready, I've signed the lease, packed all my things, and I'm just waiting for Chris' signal to move. I know this is going to generate a lot of drama, but honestly, I don't care anymore. I have to do what's best for me. Honestly, staying in that house was no longer an option. I'm ready to start over in a place where I can focus on my goals without so much chaos and stress. Update 2. Hi Reddit. I want to thank everyone for the support in my last posts. Reading your comments helped me stay sane amidst this chaos. Here's what's happened since my last report. After the big fuss about the bedroom issue, the situation at home became quite tense. My parents chose to give me the silent treatment, which in a way felt a little peaceful. Meanwhile, Drew was walking around the house like a child whose toys had been taken away, and Ami kept throwing passive-aggressive comments every time I was around. Some people really don't understand what it means to be family. That same morning, as I went for my coffee, I decided to ignore all the mess and focus on finalizing my escape plan. That's when Chris sent me a message telling me that I could move in that weekend. His roommate, showing great empathy, allowed me to use the living room to sleep until he officially moved out in a couple of weeks. It's ironic that in the midst of so much drama, strangers cared more about me than my own family. Friday night, I tried to act normally at dinner, even offering to wash the dishes at the end, which surprised everyone. My mother looked at me suspiciously, as if trying to discover my true intention. But I just smiled and told her that I was in a good mood because of a work issue. They accepted it. Late that night, when everyone had retired, I packed the last of my essentials. Laptop, some clothes, toiletries, chargers, and other essentials. It should be noted that I had already been moving most of my belongings little by little over the past few weeks. I set my alarm for 5 a.m., thinking I would have enough time to load everything into the car and leave before anyone woke up. Since Drew and his family don't get up before 9 o'clock on weekends, and my parents usually wake up around 7:30, the situation got a little complicated with Zeus, the demonic dog. When the alarm went off, I got up silently and started carrying the bags to the car. Suddenly, that little fur missile went crazy. He started barking and jumping as if I were an intruder. I panicked, thinking he would wake everyone up, and threw him one of the treats I usually bribe him with. I was prepared for this, but he just ate it and kept barking uncontrollably. Finally, I had to pick him up and lock him in the bathroom, leaving him another treat to calm him down, feeling somewhat bad for whoever found him there, but these were desperate times. I managed to load everything into the car in record time. My hands were shaking, either from the cold of the early morning or the adrenaline of finally escaping. I paused one last time in my room, observing the empty shelves and bare walls. It was strange, as I had lived in that room for most of my life and had valuable memories there before everything went downhill. For a moment I was assailed by doubt. Had I made a mistake? Would I regret leaving like this? But at that precise moment, I heard Zeus bark again from the bathroom and Drew yell from his room. "Someone turn off that dog." No, I don't regret it. I considered leaving a note, but what would I have said that hadn't already been expressed? So I took my keys, took one last look at my room and left. I drove away from my parents' house just as the sun was beginning to peek out. Everything felt surreal, as if I were in a coming-of-age movie where you expect dramatic background music to start playing. Instead, I cranked up my Metallica and sped off. I arrived at Chris's house around 6 a.m. He was still asleep, so I waited in the car, scrolling through the silence, knowing they wouldn't take long to flood me with calls and messages. Chris finally woke up around 7:30 and helped me move my things into his new home. It's nothing luxurious, a basic apartment with a small kitchen, a decent living room, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. But it's a quiet place with no screaming, no running children, no barking dogs, just blessed, beautiful calm. "Make yourself at home," he said, pointing to the couch, and added that Jim's room would be free in a couple of weeks. I flopped down on the couch and slept for 4 straight hours, the best sleep I'd had in months, even on a rather uncomfortable couch. Upon waking up and checking my phone, I found exactly what I expected. 8 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, and 2 from Drew. Surprisingly, Drew deigned to call. Plus an endless stream of messages. Mom yelled, "Jake, where are you? Are you okay? Call me now. Why is your room empty?" Dad insisted. "Son, your mother is very upset. Come home to talk about this." Drew sarcastically commented something like, "Very mature, brother, for abandoning everyone." And the guilt train was already in motion. I turned off my phone and helped Chris set up his new video game system, deciding to postpone the family drama for later. Around 6 p.m., I turned my phone back on and called my mother, feeling that I at least owed her that call, despite how unfair she had been to me. She answered on the first ring, and between shouts she asked me, "Jake, where are you?" I answered in a firm voice, "I've moved out. I'm staying with a friend." Mom didn't hesitate to reproach me. "You moved without telling us. How could you do this? Don't you realize how worried we are? Your father and I have been calling hospitals." The guilt was evident in every word. I explained, "Mom, I'm an adult, and I don't need your permission to move. I'm fine. Obviously, this has to do with the rent increase or the bedroom issue. We could have solved it if you had talked to me instead of me running away like a child." Although I said it firmly, it caused me to suppress an internal laugh, because I had already spoken to them several times about how unfair the situation was. Meanwhile, they reminded me that Drew had not contributed at all, that your brother has children, and that despite going through difficult times, it was not my responsibility to support his family. I'd been paying rent for 7 years while Drew hadn't put in a penny. Mom retorted that family helps each other, but that it has to be reciprocal. I answered, "I can't be the only one who gives while the others take." That's when my mother started to cry, something that has always been my weakness, but I held my ground. I told her that I would not return, that I had already signed a contract with Chris, and that I would pick up my things next weekend. She, as usual, expressed her disappointment, to which I replied that I was also disappointed for always putting Drew first. Then I hung up. Later, Drew sent me a sarcastic message, thanking me for letting them deal with Mom's emotional breakdown, and joked that I had moved the whole family, and somehow expected me to foot the bill. I responded ironically, pointing out that he and his family had settled in, and that I was not going to assume those costs. Dad wouldn't stop contacting me either, sending threats and blaming me, claiming that he couldn't afford the rent alone and questioning why I had decided to be an additional parental figure. Despite all the drama, I'm convinced I made the right decision. My new place is quiet, my roommate is cool, and I can finally focus on my studies and work without constant distractions. Cutting ties with my family has not been easy, but it was necessary. I cannot continue sacrificing my own happiness and my future for people who don't appreciate me. So this is my current situation. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. I thank everyone who has followed my story, and in case there are any updates or changes in the next few days, I'll be posting a new entry soon. Update 3. After a long time without communication, I want to share how things have been going. It's been a couple of weeks since I decided to leave my parents' home, and life has taken a turn that has benefited me in many ways. Since I moved in, my cohabitation with Chris has been very positive. We've found the ideal balance. Each respects their space, we share expenses, and most importantly, we avoid the usual conflicts. After years of living amidst family chaos, this new stage feels almost like a vacation for my mental health. Today my room is arranged exactly the way I want it. I can leave my laptop on my desk without worrying about someone damaging it, sleep late on weekends without being interrupted by shouts or a dog barking, and cook without receiving criticism or seeing my leftovers being eaten. Even at work, without the usual stress of home, I've felt more focused and productive. Plus, I've resumed my game development projects, a passion that I'm finally putting into action instead of just talking about it. However, the situation with my family has been more complex. Just 2 weeks after my departure, I returned to collect the rest of my things. The visit was awkward. My mother appeared visibly affected, wearing the same bathrobe from my childhood, and with a trembling voice that insisted that I shouldn't have left. My father was withdrawn, moving silently around the house, and the whole atmosphere was permeated with a heavy feeling, as if the energy of the place had been drained. Chris accompanied me to make the process quick, but my mother tried to corner me in my old room, accusing me of not having been there when they needed me. I responded briefly, reminding them that despite my attempts to engage in conversation, they chose not to listen. Her crying and my father's passivity made it clear. An atmosphere of resentment. One afternoon, my father called me for a man-to-man meeting at a cafe near my work. From the first moment, I noticed it was a trap. He looked disheveled, and his story quickly turned dramatic. He talked about how my mother was on the verge of collapse and how the family was falling apart after my departure. Just when it seemed like he was showing compassion, he dropped the real reason for our meeting, the financial situation. He told me that with my absence they were struggling to cover the mortgage on the house, and asked me to somehow contribute financially with an amount that amounted to $800 a month. "So, you want me to keep paying for a place where I no longer live?" I replied incredulously. He rushed to qualify my request as family help in difficult times, while I explained that I had decided to become independent precisely because I felt that they were taking advantage of me financially. He not only blamed me for my departure, but also justified the subsidy to Drew, who was still enjoying the house without contributing, unlike my current situation. The tension increased when my father dropped the news that without my contributions they were at risk of losing the house. Although I tried to counter by saying that it should be Drew who assumed his responsibilities, the conversation turned into an argument that ended in an uncomfortable silence. That same night, I received a series of text messages from Drew loaded with reproaches and veiled threats, criticizing me for abandoning the family at a critical time, pointing out how my absence was causing suffering to my mother and affecting my father. I couldn't take it anymore and blocked his number. Shortly after, Ami also tried to contact me subtly. She sent me a long message describing how much the children missed me, how Zoe had cried herself to sleep asking for me, and even suggested that if I didn't cooperate, they might have to move to a dangerous neighborhood. My response was firm. I was not going to allow them to take advantage of my economic situation, since I had been paying $550 rent while Drew was enjoying without contributing. After an exchange in which they accused me of being selfish, I ended up blocking them. What broke the camel's back was when, a few days later, my aunt, my mother's sister, called me. Although we rarely talked, I could tell something serious was going on. According to her, my parents had been spreading among the extended family that I had abandoned them financially, and that they were on the verge of losing their house. Curiously, they omitted mentioning that I had been paying rent for years and that Drew had never contributed. The situation became even more absurd when I discovered through a mutual friend that my parents were not actually in financial trouble. My father had received a bonus the month before my departure, which showed that the crisis was just a strategy to manipulate me and make me feel guilty in the face of so much emotional abuse. I decided to cut off all communication. I blocked their numbers, emails, social media, and even informed my work not to relay any messages from my family. During 2 weeks of silence, I felt relieved, until messages from family commanders, friends, and acquaintances began to arrive, demanding reconciliation. I ignored most of these messages, but my cousin Mark responded and told me the true extent of the mess at home. The situation was chaotic. Drew and Ami didn't even contribute, and to make matters worse, my parents had given Drew an ultimatum to get a job in 30 days. According to Mark, my mother confessed that they never really needed my money for the mortgage, as they were secretly helping Drew pay off some gambling debts while taking care of 2 children. That revelation was the final straw for me. In short, I decided to completely cut off all relationship with my parents, as well as with Drew and Ami. Although I continue to send birthday cards to the children, I remain firm in my decision to distance myself. I currently feel freer and happier than ever. I'm still dedicating myself to video game development, and I recently started dating someone I met at a programming meetup.